So it was that was fascinating to be all over North Korea.
Yeah.
Negotiate. One time they weren't cooperating, so I just took all of our staff, went to the airport, and we got on a plane and flew out.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 139 of the Camano Voice. Today I interview the former president of World Vision International. Please welcome Dean Hirsch. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview local business owners, comedians, singers, and more. I dive into their backstory to find out how they got where they are, what are some of the tips for you to do the same, and find out where they are going. Tune in every week as I interview more of the people you see every day. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. How was your week going? We got our, let's see, what happened this week? We had two of our good friends get married over the weekend, so that was fun. And now you're hearing this, and this is a week after that weekend. But regardless, so I had a great wedding. Congratulations to them. And we wish them the very best. Okay, that was my that's my weekly update. So hope you enjoyed it. Anyways, hope your week was going well. So today I'm interviewing the former president of World Vision International. So his name is Dean Hirsch. And for many of you, you probably already know, World Vision's a pretty large organization. Obviously, it's worldwide. He worked with them for many years now. I should have written down how many years it was, and of course I did not. But he worked most of his career with World Vision, starting at the bottom and working his way all the way up to the president position. Because World Vision is worldwide, and because of they're so well known in the world for what they do and helping people, whether that's with food. I think a lot of people think of them as like the people that like you support children through, and they do have that, but they also provide food, water. They do all sorts of stuff all over the world. And so as president of this organization, he got to work with many countries that were, that no one else can visit because they're shut down. You are not allowed to enter these countries. So as you heard in the opening, one of those countries was North Korea. And so we get into how they got in there, what they did there, and how they made sure that the people that needed the food got the food instead of it just going to the soldiers or government officials. So we get into all of this and more. It's a fascinating podcast. I'm so excited for this one to finally be releasing. And so, without further ado, here's my conversation with Dean Hirsch. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the former president of World Vision International. Welcome to the podcast, Dean Hirsch.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Dean.
Dean was born in Los Angeles.
Okay.
When there were still in the area a lot of orange groves and lemon groves.
Yep.
And grew up there and then went off to college, to a private school called Westmont College, a liberal arts college in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And from there, got a desire to start looking at trying to be a university president.
Okay.
So I went off to graduate school, but got drafted for Vietnam.
Okay.
And decided that I wanted to be an officer to tell people what to do. So I joined the Army, and I became second lieutenant.
Okay.
And when I got my commission, 4 of us were called out and asked to go to IBM Computer School.
Okay.
And I went to this, learned everything about the 360, the 370, room full of computers.
Oh, wow.
And was involved in my Army career of helping develop software and installing it across Army posts.
Okay.
And one particular one was Fort Lewis, Washington.
Oh, nice.
So I did that. Did that, and then I got out of the Army and wanted to still pursue being a university president, but a friend of mine contacted my wife and said, come and talk to us at World Vision.
Okay.
And so I went and talked to them, And at the lunch table, these two fellows were very nervous. And at the end of the lunch, they offered me a job. And I said, what's this about? And they said, well, the gentleman in charge of all of our IBM computers that we have just resigned this morning, and he's going to Jet Propulsion Laboratory for a Mars mission.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we got to have somebody.
Yep.
And that's how I got with World Vision.
Okay.
So it was a good journey. I never became a university president.
There's still time.
There it is.
Awesome. So growing up in California then, what was your childhood like?
I grew up, and we were very involved in the church.
Okay.
And this church had a gym, and one wall was all glass windows so that the community would come in.
Okay.
So I grew up with sports.
Yep.
And volleyball and basketball.
Nice.
And doing all types of things. Very active youth group and very active community. So
Okay.
That was very good. And then part of it too was studying,
Okay.
because I wanted to get to college.
Yep.
And my parents didn't spend a lot of time tutoring me or encouraging me.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting and working through it, and up in the ups and downs, but graduated and got off to college.
Nice. Were your parents, had they gone to college and stuff?
My father had, yes. He
Okay.
had gone, and he was an executive with Sears Roebuck,
Okay.
something of the past.
Wow.
And he was in charge of a portion of Sears Roebuck for the West Coast.
Okay.
So very mathematical.
Yep.
And very involved, and a lot of people skills. He had tremendous people skills.
Yeah. Nice. So there wasn't a big push from your family to go to college and get an education then?
Well, my mother was very clear which colleges I was not going to. She was clear, you're not going there. That isn't hard enough.
Okay.
And said, you're gonna, you need a liberal arts degree. You need to be able to have critical thinking.
Yep.
You need to be able to speak, and you need to be able to write.
Yep.
And here are your choices.
Nice.
That's a true story.
Okay. So, so you went to college to get your liberal arts, and then with the Vietnam War and everything, did you say were you drafted, or did you end up?
I was
enlisted?
drafted, but in those days, when you receive your draft notice, you have 10 days to enlist.
Okay.
So my father, I was now in Indiana at graduate school, studying college administration.
Yep.
And my father would call me every week and tell me what's happening in California on the draft numbers.
Okay.
So we knew I had a low number.
Okay.
So many of you don't even understand that system.
Yeah.
But I had a low number. It knew it was coming. So I went to all the services and did all their testing.
Yep.
And see who would make me the very best offer.
Okay.
And I wanted to actually be in the Navy and run a big aircraft carrier, but they did not make me a good offer. The Army actually made me a good offer.
Okay.
And so I took that, and as soon as I got my draft notice, I just went in, saw the recruiter, and we'd done all the paperwork.
Okay.
And then he arranged so I could finish the semester.
Yep.
And then I entered the Army.
Okay. So what was that like for you? Because like you said, many of us of my generation stuff we haven't had that happen. And so what was that like for you?
Well, it was very different because you were out on the field, the parade field, at 5:30 every morning, and you ran 5 miles.
Okay.
So, and the other thing is, there was a lot of yelling.
Yeah.
There was in your ear. I mean, part of the issue is they were trying to break you.
Yep.
Because, they assumed we were all going to Vietnam.
Okay.
And interesting, a lot of my class went to Korea.
Okay.
And warmed themselves on top of tanks.
Okay.
So, it was very different than the university college setting.
Yes. Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of intellectual discussion. And you went to class every day.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, you'd had physical training, but we went to classes, and I learned a lot. And one of the best things they did is they sent me off to a professional public speaking school.
Okay.
And that was incredible. It was very helpful.
Yeah.
And also, how do you make quick decisions?
Yeah.
And then I was responsible for many men at one time. And how do you make sure that you take care of all of them, protect them, and keep them on the journey with you?
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. So then from getting back from that, that's when you went and entered into the is that when you did the IBM school, or was that during the Army time?
I did the IBM school right after my commission.
Okay.
And then and part of it was in that time I was involved in a company, tank company.
Okay.
And responsible for some men. But then I went to IBM school. Then I got assigned to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
to Computer Systems Command
Okay.
of the Army. And I was at a civilian firm.
Okay.
And all these people were designing programs. A lot of you probably don't know what a punch card is.
I've seen them.
They used to have punch cards, and the clerks would punch in. You'd fill out a card every day for your hours.
Mm-hmm.
They'd punch it into a card.
Yep.
This is another person.
Yep.
And then they'd enter it into a scanner or a card reader.
Yep.
And then it would go into one of these big tapes, and you'd merge these tapes. And I was responsible for installations.
Okay.
And part of it was in the early days. What happened was everyone was paid according to a time card,
Okay. Yep.
even people working for the Army.
Okay.
And so we designed a civilian payroll system.
Really? Okay.
And what that meant was it's the very first time that we no longer had to do all these laborious steps to get the final paycheck done.
Right.
And so I got involved in that, and then helped install it in a number of installations across the United States.
Okay.
Which wasn't always easy.
Yep.
And one of the very interesting things is I and others, we'd always meet the commanding officer, like at Fort Lewis, the general.
Okay.
And these generals saying, "What, you are in your 20s and you're telling me what to do?" And part of my job was to try and be a buffer between officers, commanding officers, and some of the young nerds who were very bright.
Yep.
And I would say to these officers, you need these young men and women
Yeah.
because they were going to make you successful.
Yep.
So,
Wow. How did that go over? I feel like that would be, well, one, intimidating for you at your age to be talking to these generals.
well, I typically with the commanding officers and senior officers, I didn't have a problem.
Okay.
Sometimes it was with my peers who got quite angry and frustrated. And it was their way or no way.
Oh,
And
okay.
I said, look, don't be right, but dead right.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So then you finally exited the Army, and then you were prepping to again go back into pursuing school.
I did. Well, I actually took a year and went off to a school, and I was the director of counseling.
Okay.
And I enjoyed that, but there were a lot of students didn't have an appreciation for veterans at that time.
Yeah.
And you'll know there was a lot of anger towards anyone that had served in the military.
Right.
And a lot of nasty things were said.
Yeah.
I said, I'll try something else for a while. And ultimately, through my wife, this friend called from World Vision.
Okay.
And we had lunch. They offered me this job because the other fellow went off to JPL.
Yep.
And that was the beginning of my journey.
All right. So, had you heard or known much about World Vision prior to this?
I had,
Okay.
because World Vision's founder was Bob Pierce.
Okay.
And he had really started World Vision in China as well as Korea, the Korean War.
Okay.
Dealing with orphans.
Yep.
And he would come to the United States and talk in different places, including churches and others. And my parents would take me to his rallies.
Okay.
And I would tell my dad, leave your checkbook at home, because Bob Pierce had a way to be in everybody's pocket. And but that's how I knew of World Vision and Bob Pierce.
Okay.
And but that wasn't the stimulus to get in. It was
Yeah.
all through computers.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So, then when you started with World Vision with the computers, what was kind of the state of that department and stuff?
Well, it was running well, but they had 3 different sites. Some of your listeners will know the IBM 360 series, then the IBM 370 series.
Okay.
So we had one 360, which is a whole room. I mean, a whole room. It's not and these laptops have more power than some of these rooms did.
Yeah.
And then the 370s, which were even more powerful.
Okay.
But the issue is you had to change tapes, reels on all these.
Wow.
And you had to just make sure everyone did everything right, and they went 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And if you made a mistake, you lost a lot of processing time.
Wow.
So I did that, and it was great. But then I started learning more about World Vision, working in the world,
Yeah.
and working with kids, working with the oppressed, those who had lost through damaged storms and things. And so literally a year and a half later, I saw the vice president for all the work around the world. He was from Australia.
Yeah.
And we got to be good friends. And he said, well, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to Africa.
Okay.
And so I only stayed in the computers for a little over a year.
Okay.
Because I got so interested. And so my wife and I were assigned to Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay.
And we lived in Nairobi, Kenya for 5 years. It was supposed to be a 1-year assignment, but we stayed 5 years. And I traveled all throughout Africa.
Okay.
So I'd been 52 countries in Africa, and I'd been to about 30 of them at that time.
Yeah.
And opening offices in Ghana, in the former Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe,
Okay.
in Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, and traveled all the time.
Yeah.
All the time, and got involved in a couple coups in the former Zaire, which is now the Congo, and in Ghana.
Okay.
So it wasn't all just a nice trip.
Yeah.
Sometimes you were dodging some bullets. But,
Wow. So what had led you to Africa? Why did you choose that?
well, because my wife had a roommate who was serving as a missionary in Africa.
Okay.
And that was part of the emphasis. And plus, the World Vision had gotten into television in the United States.
Okay.
It was the first appeals for helping children and sponsor a child. And it was growing so fast, and Africa was opening up.
Okay.
And I said, I'd like to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
And so that's what I ended up doing, is going there and working there, while my wife worked in the Mathare, Nairobi, Kenya Mental Hospital,
Okay.
counseling.
Yep.
So
Nice. So during the times where there were coups or things going on, you had been in the Army. Did you see action when you were in the Army?
No, never saw any action.
Okay.
Other than arguments about computers.
Okay.
So I don't talk about it too much, because a lot of my classmates, they either went to Vietnam or they went to Korea, and I was very blessed to have an incredible assignment in the Army.
Yeah. So when you were there in Africa then, what was that like for you when these situations started arising?
Well, I knew how to protect myself.
Yeah.
And the first thing you learn, no matter what, even here in the United States, who's responsible for your safety and security? You are.
Yeah.
Don't be waiting on someone else. And even today, I always look for where's the exit?
Yeah.
How do you get out? What if with my wife? How do I ensure that I protect her?
Yeah.
And you just learn those things,
Yeah.
and they live with you.
Yeah.
And I use those a lot in Africa.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, during that time, did you have to flee into different countries then when things started?
Well, we had a case in Ghana. We woke up to jets and the fighting, and we were at a guest house, and it was right there, a military. And so there were 3 of us.
Okay.
One person was from Africa, one person was from Germany, and myself. And I wanted to leave, and the country south of Ghana is Togo,
Okay.
and there's a river. And I said, look, we got to get ourselves that river and go across. And the only way is we're going to have to swim across. And the fellow from Africa said, there's no way. There's crocodiles in that river, and you won't get across. And I said, well, we didn't ever leave. We just stayed there.
Okay.
And we hid for 3 days.
Okay.
Literally, we hid behind a block wall for 3 days while the fighting went on.
Wow.
But,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then, and during that time, were you in communication with anyone, or?
Well, we didn't have the cell phones.
Yep.
There weren't telephones per se. A couple of times, what I would do is you could go to the airport and you could talk to a pilot, and he would let you into one of the commercial planes and use their radio system.
Okay.
And that's what I did
Okay.
a couple of times, particularly when I was in the Zaire. And, that's the only way to communicate.
Yeah.
And so I'd get a message out or get on the phone and because they had sophisticated communications in the cockpits.
Yep. Yep. Very cool. So then, over your time in Africa, what were some of your favorite countries you got to visit, or certain areas?
Well, I love Tanzania. They're at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro.
Okay.
It's everyone should go there to Arusha.
Okay.
It is fantastic. Go on safari there. It's peaceful, it's quiet, and beautiful with the Mount Kilimanjaro. I think too. I really enjoyed Kenya. It was a great place to live.
Yeah.
It's on the equator.
Okay.
And so perfect weather most of the time.
Yeah.
And for downtime we would go on safari. And so that was enjoyable to get out and see God's creation and see all the animals.
Yeah.
So that was very good too. And I also enjoyed places like parts of South Africa,
Okay.
Cape Town.
Yep.
We had work all over in South Africa, and so got to see a lot of it and get to understand some of the dynamics of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, at the end of those 5 years, then, what kind of prompted you to end that time there and move on to something else?
I was asked to come back and open up the Office of World Vision in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
This is when the Reagan administration was in the President of the United States.
Okay.
And the Reagan administration, they knew that the Berlin Wall was coming down, but they didn't know when.
Okay.
And Russia had collapsed, basically.
Yeah.
And Russia was no longer able to feed Poland, able to feed Hungary and others. And so we got called by the Reagan administration, and I met with his cabinet.
Yep.
Because they wanted us and Catholic Relief Service to feed Poland.
Okay.
So the people wouldn't starve. And we discussed it, and we put a program together, and I walked out of that meeting with $116 million based on a handshake. But we started feeding Poland with Catholic Relief Service.
Yeah.
And because it was desperate.
Yeah.
It was desperate. And of course, then ultimately the wall came down, and you were able to move more freely and transport goods.
Yep.
But put that together and then expanded their office in Washington, D.C.
Okay. So did you end up going to Poland at all, or were you just in charge of the?
No, I went. I went over. I spent a lot of time in the countries that were behind the Iron Curtain.
Okay.
Because we quietly had work going on.
Yeah.
Helping people, particularly associated with the church and others who were not favored by the regimes that were in power.
Yeah.
And I met with some of the leaders of those countries and discussed the importance of respecting rights.
Yeah.
And putting relief programs together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very cool. Okay, so you moved back. Did you move to Washington D.C.?
No, I commuted from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
And did that, and then I ended up. The big thing was, if you remember, Bono, and We Are the World, and all this. I was part of that. And that was for the Ethiopia famine. Millions of people were starving.
Yeah.
And so World Vision, just in Ethiopia alone, we had over $100 million program. And I had overall responsibility in the United States to make sure this all worked. So I was going to Ethiopia a lot.
Okay.
Somalia a lot. And different places. But Ethiopia was the one that really faced the brunt of the drought.
Yeah.
And we put that together.
Okay.
And again, the U.S. government was extremely generous to the agencies to help us with the food and setting up the feeding centers.
Yeah. So when these things are happening, I mean, I know there's people that are kind of have a pulse on what's going on in the world, but how did World Vision get involved in these different areas? Like, how did the information get to them, and how did World Vision be the ones that stepped forward and said, we will help take care of this?
Well, World Vision was one of the largest agencies in the world, and still today it's probably the largest private agency in the whole world.
Okay.
And so, governments knew about us, and so we got invited in, and we'd sit down. We always signed protocols. So whether it was Islamic country or whether it was a communist country, because at that time, Ethiopia was run by the Russians.
Okay.
And but we always registered, said who we are, here's our non-negotiables,
Yeah.
and we always were allowed to work.
Okay.
And
What were things that were considered non-negotiables for you guys?
Well, first of all, that we are Christian,
Okay.
and that we believe Jesus loves all the children of the world.
Yeah.
So we made that very clear. The other thing is verify. We taught a lot of different leaders the word verification.
Okay.
We want to see with our eyes.
Yeah.
We're not just shipping.
Yeah.
And we also said our grains and everything, we bagged it and we put our appropriate label on it so we could count the bags of grain.
Okay.
And USAID did the same thing from the U.S. government. So.
Yeah.
The most interesting one, though, is in the late 90s, I got a call from North Korea.
Okay.
And so I've been in North Korea 5 or 7 times. I've been all over North Korea because they had a terrible flood.
Okay.
And your listeners, some of them will know that North Korea should never have been an agricultural zone. It should have been industrial.
Okay.
And South Korea should have been the agricultural zone.
So it's flipped.
That's flipped. And North Korea does not have the ability, even today, to feed itself.
Okay.
So even today, China and the United States feed North Korea.
Okay.
And but we were called in, and so we negotiated. And I said we will not work in the capital city. They had a 3 level on caloric intake.
Okay.
The Army got 100% or above. All the diplomats in their city got about 80%, and the people in the rural area were fortunate if they got 60%.
Okay.
And so we worked, and we initially I said I want to have our programs all next to the prison camps.
Okay.
We don't have any prison camps. And they said, well, if you look at Google here, they show them. True story.
Oh my word.
We said, okay, we want to work next to the coal mines because the floods had flooded the coal mines. And as a result of that, people didn't have work, they didn't have food. And so we did massive train loads of grains and other foods out of China.
Yeah.
And then we set up noodle factories.
Okay.
We had we set up 5 noodle factories in North Korea, and they produced wet noodles.
Okay.
And why wet noodles? Because they have to be eaten the same day. And that way we got them to the orphanages, we got them to the elderly, and to the people that needed them.
Yeah.
And none of our wet noodles ever got to the military.
Wow.
So it's that was fascinating to be all over North Korea.
Yeah.
Negotiate. One time they weren't cooperating, so I just took all of our staff, went to the airport, and we got on a plane and flew out and left. And then I got a call from New York, went back and saw the ambassador in New York, and he said, okay, we understand. You only want to work with the children. You only want to work in the rural areas. I said, okay.
Wow.
And we
So
went back in.
what was, for you, like, that's a super intense situation of, like, it seems very scary. I mean, just from the media and, media hypes things up, but, like, that's a scary position to be in, and to actually have to, like, draw lines and say, no, this is where we're going.
Well, part of the issue is we did respect their customs.
Mm-hmm.
We never disparaged, even though you had thoughts, because they had these posters, anti-United States and things like that.
Yeah.
we were there and we were diplomats, and Ronald Reagan had said in Ethiopia, very important point that many people don't know today, Russia controlled Ethiopia, but Ronald Reagan said, we as Americans cannot let any child die due to politics.
Yeah.
And I carried that into North Korea.
Yeah.
We can't let these kids starve. There's stunting, there's brain damage. We saw a lot of kids dying in front of us. And I said, we got to help the kids. But we were firm. Verification.
Yeah.
They learned it.
Yeah.
We went to every site, and we got out and saw everything and spent time practically all over the country. I'm probably one of the few Americans that's been on each side of the DMZ
Yeah.
and heard the propaganda from each side.
Wow, that's crazy. That's very cool. So, when you've worked with these countries, then, like you mentioned, Muslim countries or communist countries, when you guys came in and said we're a Christian organization, was that a sticking point? I would imagine that would be a sticking point for quite a few of these countries.
Most of these countries needed World Vision.
Yeah.
They needed help, and they were having, a lot of times Catholic Relief Service would be there, or CARE would be there, but they knew World Vision was big. We were one of the biggest food movers, next to Catholic Relief Service, in the world, and they needed us.
Yeah.
So we had some very intense discussions. We signed documents, but it always worked.
Yeah.
I think we only once did we get expelled, and that was in northern Sudan.
Okay.
But not the southern Sudan,
Okay.
because that was southern Sudan then became a country on its own.
Yep.
So
What was it that was the point where they kicked you guys out then, and what was the reason?
well, part of it was because they felt that part of it was because we had very clear criteria on the relief that we would do,
Okay.
where it would go, and we were decrying the fact that they were killing some of their people,
Yeah.
and said no,
Can't do that.
we just can't handle that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So you'd been doing all of this other travel then. You helped out in Poland and stuff. What kind of happened after some of these things then?
Well, what ended up happening was that the president, a new president of World Vision International, there's about 100 World Visions in the world, and they all
Okay.
report to the president of International.
Okay.
And the new president of International asked me to become the chief operating officer.
Okay.
And so I became the chief operating officer of World Vision International,
Okay.
and did that for a number of years. So now I had about 7 vice presidents reporting to me,
Yep.
of all different nationalities, and we were now growing.
Yeah.
We're close to $2 billion, and just a lot of issues in the world.
Yeah.
Whether North Korea, whether it's Africa, or you'll recall the tsunami that hit in 2004, I think.
Yeah.
In Aceh, December 26th. I was having breakfast and heard it, and I told my wife, I said, I'm getting on a plane. And I immediately left and went to Aceh, and that's where, over 200,000 people died because of the tidal wave.
Yeah.
And there was nothing left. It was gone.
Yeah.
I met with the vice president of Indonesia and discussed and said, here's what we can do and here's what we can't do. And we signed a protocol and we went to work.
Wow. So when you were working as the chief operations
COO.
COO. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so at that point, you were working worldwide then.
Worldwide.
Yeah. But you were still the one that would go boots on the ground if something major happened?
If something major happened, I would get there,
Okay.
because a part of it was to encourage the teams.
Yep.
Very difficult circumstances. Many of them were living in tents.
Yeah.
Also to see how can we get more resources.
Yeah.
Again, to verify the need, and also meet with governments, the U.S. government, the Canadian government, the Australian government, and the European Union. So
Yep.
I've spent a lot of time in Brussels
Okay.
negotiating contracts so that we could get assistance.
Okay. Wow. So, so you were working as the COO then for many years.
Yes.
Then how did that kind of transition, or where did you go next from there?
Well, the president then, for health reasons, resigned, and I became the new president.
Okay.
So in 1995 or so, I became the new president,
Yep.
and I remained until 2010,
Wow.
when my wife said, "It's time."
Time.
She was very wise.
Very cool. So, what was that for you? Obviously, you started with the computers there.
Yes.
You had gone through all of these different sections of World Vision as you were doing it. What was it? How was it different, I guess, when you were the president of overseeing this massive organization?
Well, I now had my own COO that reported to me, dealing with daily operations.
Yep.
Now I was meeting with world leaders. I was meeting with corporations. The World Economic Forum in Davos every year, where all the world leaders and corporate leaders go. I attended that for 10 years.
Wow.
And for World Vision, as well as other groups, CARE and others, it costs, first of all, membership is $1 million.
Okay.
And then to attend the week is $30,000. We didn't have to pay any of that.
Okay.
But it was still very expensive for the hotels and
Yeah.
dinners. Dinners were over $100 a night. And I said, I can't spend donors' money on that.
Yeah.
So I volunteered to speak
Okay.
all the time. And, I, with many different world leaders, you'd be on the panel with them, or I debated the Minister of Agriculture of France one time. And he would, France is the worst offender on subsidies in the world.
Okay.
They give more to their cows, individual cows, than they do to their children.
Wow.
And so I debated him on that. And at the end of the debate, and there's hundreds of people there, and at the end he throws his hands in the air and he says, "I have to do what my constituents want." Well, I'm not sure his constituents wanted every cow to have such a high subsidy. But that, I met a lot of world leaders, and
Yeah.
some of the best, some of the worst.
Yeah.
It was very interesting, though, in meeting these, and I met some of the worst, but they all love the children of their country.
Yeah. Even the worst of them.
That's right. And, well, how does that work?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah.
And so,
Wow. So yeah, I think I do find that interesting about human psychology. I've listened to some talks about it, and that regardless of how far gone we may be as a human being, our brain cannot believe that we are in the wrong, even
Yes.
when we're very clearly in the wrong.
Yeah.
And our brain will always figure out a way to make it so that it's justified.
that's right. You're exactly right. Very hard for some political leaders in every country, including
Yeah.
ours, to accept they might not be exactly right.
Right.
And there might be some other views that should be considered.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're in those situations, when you see that many different people from our world leaders from around the world, for you, what was that like being around that many different types of people and talking with all of them?
Well, part of it was being prepared.
Okay.
Understand what the issues are. Understanding the nuances. Don't fly by the seat of your pants. And try and be an expert on something.
Okay.
So my focus was, I met with the head of the International Monetary Fund. Spent a lot of time with James Wolfenson, the president of the World Bank. And I said, look, I know you have these policies, but I do not want you to get rid of the safety net for children,
Yeah.
particularly women and children. So I always talked about safety nets
Okay.
because, the IMF does structural adjustments in countries.
Okay.
And, you don't want people being hurt.
Yeah.
But that structural adjustment has to take place.
Yeah.
And so I'd always speak about safety nets. You were too young to even remember the riots here in Seattle when the World Trade Organization
Okay.
in Seattle, and they broke all the windows out.
Oh, okay.
And everything. And so James Wolfenson, I was called in with 6 other leaders from around the world in unions and things, and he didn't want that happening at the next meeting. And I said, well, you got the wrong people around the table. What you've got to do is you got to get some of the rock throwers in the room.
Yeah.
But with Wolfenson and also the World Trade Organization of Michael Moore
Okay.
of New Zealand, he was on the top on Time Magazine. He's the most hated man in the world. And I met with him in Geneva, and I said, Michael, you'll never see me throwing a rock or putting bad words in the Newsweek or something about you.
Yeah.
I'm going to see you in your office, and I'm going to look you right in your eye, and I'm going to tell you what you're doing to the kids of the world.
Yeah.
Well, from that, that was an interesting piece, because he then called me a couple of weeks later and said, I want you to come to Geneva and debate me.
Okay.
I am going to say all the good that the World Trade Organization's doing, and I want you to debate me and tell me what we're not doing right. And George Soros is going to be our referee.
Okay.
And so here's my premise that I debated. That what the World Trade Organization was doing to Africa, to Latin America, and parts of Asia, if they had done that to the United States and Britain, the United States and Britain would still be developing countries today.
Wow.
And so I attacked them on policy.
Yeah.
And the lack of free trade, the issue of subsidies. And that really then went all around the world in the news, and I got a lot of speaking engagements. Probably too many.
Okay. So something that's come up a couple times now through our conversation is you've mentioned subsidies of countries that do them and don't. And I know every country does them to some degree.
Yep.
What is it that you've seen as maybe as more of a general rule that you've seen that subsidies do in the negative sense?
Well, one thing is the EU, the Europeans, I mean, they're working on it, but what they do is they prevent finished goods from Africa,
Okay.
like cheeses and things like that, from entering Europe.
Okay.
The United States has very strong rules on subsidies too, and about things that can come in. But going back to the Bush administration and then the Clinton administration, they started lessening the restrictions and using subsidies to help farmers.
Okay.
To help with one of the big things was in the United States, you know, we have a weather station in every place. Camano Island, you can go and see it.
Yeah.
Every place. In Africa, there were only in all of Africa, there might have been 10 weather stations.
Whoa.
And helping in that to help them with weather patterns.
Yeah.
And to understand, you know, the rains are coming or the floods are coming.
Yeah.
And so that gets into, subsidies are more than just food, but it's also helping to prevent devastation from storms and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So, what are some of your favorite memories of working with World Vision?
I think the favorite memory is the people.
Yeah.
As I said, we are close to 100 countries, all these different people, a rich heritage in each of the countries.
Yeah.
Some of the countries desperately poor, but everyone was working hard to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I went to all these offices, and the first thing I do is I went around to every cubicle desk and shook hands and thanked every person.
Yeah.
Every office. And then, you know, and meet with them, hear and listen to them. I would listen very carefully. I wouldn't make any quick judgments.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, well, what if we try this, or what do you suggest?
Yeah.
But it was the people.
Yeah.
It was the people. And, you know, and then they introduce you to other people, and just meeting government leaders and meeting many different church leaders. And it was rich. It was rich.
Nice. So you also, being the president of this organization, you've obviously got so many people that are underneath you and that you have so many things moving. how did you on a day-to-day basis? Because I have a small business here, and I feel like in a day-to-day, I get like 5% of the work I was trying to get done, and the rest of it's all, running around doing something else. How did you stay focused, and how do you keep moving forward on these massive projects that you have going on when you have so many people reporting to you?
Well, I spent a little time at the Harvard Business School.
Okay.
And the only thing I remember that was beaten into my head, stay focused. Stay focused. That's my advice to you. Don't be distracted.
Okay.
Okay, you got to stay focused. The other thing is only your direct reports, only put people in there that you totally trust.
Okay.
Totally trust. There's got to be strong trust.
Yeah.
Because you cannot afford, your time's too valuable to micromanage.
Okay.
And make sure everyone understands the direction, the strategy that you have,
Yeah.
and where you're going.
Yeah.
And then be very clear about what your expectations are
Yeah.
for them.
Okay.
And that's what I did, it was a great team.
Yeah.
I had total trust in them. And if they didn't agree with me, they told me.
Yeah.
And I listened.
Yeah.
I would always listen. So, but you got to have a good team.
Yeah.
When you're, when you have 40,000 employees and you've got in all these countries
Around the world, yeah.
Yeah, and and every now and then, I would pick up the phone and call I'd call a different national director every day,
Okay.
and I'd just say, "How's it going?" And if I read something in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or something like that, I'd immediately send off an email to them.
Yeah.
And so I just saw this. And then every one of our senior staff all around the world got a personal letter from me every year.
Okay.
And just connection,
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah. Well, that's much harder to do in such a large organization as well.
Well, you have a few staff that work
Yeah.
for you.
Few people to help you out. Yeah.
That's right.
Very cool. All right. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions. The first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
Breakfast at Farmer's Cafe.
Okay.
I enjoy that.
Nice.
They're a great team.
Yeah, I've heard about them quite a bit, and I checked out their menu. I tried to meet my dad up there one day, but it didn't
Yeah.
work out.
Right next
But-
to the Chevron station, I think it is.
Yep.
Across from Hagen.
Yep. Yep.
It's a great place.
Awesome. Yeah, I need to check that place out.
Yep.
Who is the most influential person outside of your family in your life?
I had influence Valdir Stornago. He's from Brazil.
Okay.
He taught me, things aren't going to always go your way. And he said, there's a lot of mosquitoes. And he said, once in a while, you're going to swallow them. Just get used to swallowing some mosquitoes. So accept it. It's not going to always be the way you want it. And don't ruin your life over it.
Very cool. All right. So this is a fill in the blank question. So I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
I would love to be able to call different world leaders together, even those that are involved in a war right now,
Yeah.
and sit down and work the thing out and find the common ground.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was in Ethiopia, met with the president of Ethiopia, the foreign minister, and their biggest worry was their troops were bringing AIDS home
Okay.
from up in Eritrea.
Yep.
And my issue is quit spending all your money on your army for a worthless war and put your money into capturing water when it rains so you don't have these famines
Yeah.
and build dams.
Yeah.
And, I enjoy that.
Yeah.
I've met with one of Putin's classmates, just one-on-one. And that's for another podcast.
Okay.
But fascinating.
Yeah.
And we got to sit down.
Yeah.
We are global citizens,
Yeah.
and we have a responsibility to each other and to find a way to coexist and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think even like when you look even across the U.S., that's being harder and harder to do on a national level, much less an international level.
Well, I think you and I should fire the entire Congress.
There we go. Let's move forward.
We'll move forward. You can be the president.
Oh, I don't know about that.
But, yeah, I mean, both sides.
Yeah.
Come on.
For sure.
Let's have a talk. Let's deal with these issues. There's a lot of complex issues.
There are. Yeah.
And let's get off the simplified versions of everything
Yes.
and deal with real substance.
And let's get some creative solutions going.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Who is an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next that I can actually get a hold of? So,
Charlie, do you know Charlie Keith?
I don't know if I do.
Well, Charlie Keith, he worked for World Vision. He's one of the top fun friend raisers in the whole United States.
Okay.
I mean, the guy's incredible.
Okay.
And let him tell you some stories.
All right.
That, yeah.
Very cool. All right. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Well, be patient, enjoy the journey, and remember, everyone you meet going up, you're probably going to meet again, and met while you're going down. And people have long memories. So, you know.
Yeah.
Everyone I meet, I try to affirm
Yeah.
in some way.
Yeah.
Even
That's very
you know,
cool.
just you're going to meet them going up, you're going to meet them going down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I think that's really important, especially with what you were saying before is when it comes down to the things about working at World Vision, it wasn't the traveling, it wasn't the projects, it wasn't anything. It was the people that you got to meet along the
Those
way.
are people meet, and you know, my goal in life, everyone I communicate with and touch, did they leave encouraged after I spend time with them?
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very cool. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Dean Hirsch for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to tell your friends and do all of those things. I've completely lost where I was going with that, but that makes this a fun outro. That's the word. Anyways, for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.